Welcome, everybody. We're going to open with a version of the set aside prayer. God, please set aside everything that I think I know about myself, my unmanageability, my spiritual path, and you for an open mind and a new experience of myself, my unmanageability, my spiritual path, and especially you. Thanks for taking the steps with us. My name is David, and I'm a recovered alcoholic and drug addict. And with me is
I am David, and I am a recovered alcoholic and drug addict. Welcome, everyone.
This is not a fellowship group or meeting. Instead, over 12 weeks, we are taking the 12 steps of recovery together, following the precise, specific, clear-cut directions in the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous. Because this is not a fellowship group, anyone interested in the program of recovery in the Big Book is welcome to take the steps with us. The goal is to take the steps and learn how to take someone quickly through the steps yourself. Some other information and ground rules. We are recording the audio. We'll share it in the WhatsApp group out on the Purpose of This Book podcast as well. If you're not in our WhatsApp group, Emily will put the link in the chat. And if you're having problems, just reach out to Emily. She'll help you, or you could chat me on WhatsApp and I can help you too. Um, Please commit to being here every week and really try to stay on camera, please. Let's all be engaged together here. There's no attendee comment portion during the study, but we'll field questions, so please post those in the chat. We'll try to answer them as we go or later on if not. We or some of our recovered peers are also available to help outside this study. We try to keep it to 1 hour. So if you're having trouble with any of the concepts, ideas, things we're talking about, just reach out, let us know, and one of us will make time for you this week. We're definitely not the official Big Book experts or gurus. We're just sharing our experience and knowledge from our study of the book and the teachings of others, past and present. Our dictionary person is Emily Wave. There she is. And she's putting the definitions in the chat and in the WhatsApp group. And generally speaking, the resources we refer to, especially the worksheets we're going to be looking at again today, they're all available on our website, which is www.purposeofthisbook.com. That website is not a commercial enterprise. It's just a website that we talk about recovery. So no weirdness there, guys. Go to the website for help. And with that being said, we are in our second week talking about step four. So we're going to wrap step four up today. David's going to do a little recap, but I'll set the table and then he'll recap what we did last week. So in the fourth step, there's three inventories. There's a resentment inventory that we spent all of last week talking about. And then this week, we're going to talk about the other two inventories in the fourth step, which are the fear inventory and the sex conduct inventory. So David will do a little recap on that resentment inventory from last week.
All right, thank you, David. Yeah, welcome, guys. I'm glad you guys are all here today. And as David pointed out, this is our written inventory, the mother of all inventories. This is our fourth step. And let's go back in the review and start out by we did resentments last week. And resentments is a thought that I send through my mind. And every time I do it, you get a little worse and I get a little better. You get a little worse and I get a little better. So resending the thought. On page 64 in the third paragraph is where we started out talking about this fourth step inventory. And the first inventory that we went over is resentment. And it says resentment is the number one offender, number one in quotations, number one. Very important to understand that. It destroys, strong language, destroys more alcoholics than anything else. And from it stems all forms of spiritual disease. So this is the unmanageability, the second half of the first step. This is not talking about drinking and drugging. This is talking about my unmanageability, which is my bigger problem. We have been not only mentally and physically ill, so the obsession of the mind, the craving of the body they're talking about there. We have been spiritually sick, the malady, untreated alcoholism. Then it says when the spiritual malady is overcome, this is the process of order here. We straighten out mentally and physically. See, I am one who wants immediate gratification. I want the physical to come first, and then I'll work on a little of the spiritual. No, that's not how this works. This works out in this order for sure. And Bill's real clear on it. I need to have a spiritual awakening. That's good. The result of that is going to come through steps 4 through 9 as I do this work. I can't explain it other than it is magical, it is spiritual, it's divine, it is a relationship with power that does that, and also the work that I have to put into this thing. But it talks about that we straighten out the spiritual malady has to be overcome first. And then as we go on, Bill points out to us in that same paragraph that we put this on paper. And in our first column, we're going to list people, institutions, principles of whom we were angry. So we did that. We put that list down. And as we did that, we ignored the fact of what they did to us. We're just writing down that list. We're going left to right. And then why we were angry is in our second column. And what did it affect? It affected my self-esteem, my pocketbook, my ambitions, my personal relationships, including sex. That was my third column. And then we found out on page 67, their truths, the truths about myself. For the first time in my life, I found out what everyone else knew about me that I didn't know about myself, is where my wrongs and my harms were. Not my part. Take that out of your vocabulary. We're not looking at parts. It's just like a pie. Like you cut a pie in pieces, everybody gets a part. No, that's not what this is about. This is about me being accountable for my behaviors in the past so that I can take these things to God in 6 and not cling to those things so he can remove from them in 7. I think I'm just going to end up being there. This is the miracle of the whole process here of doing this work. It is absolutely a miracle as you look back at this thing, but it is certainly a written inventory.
And you know what? Let's just indulge for just maybe two more minutes here, real quick. Emily, could you show the resentment inventory worksheet from last week again? Now, if you weren't here, we're not going to go over the whole thing again because we got a lot of new content to get to. But those of you who were here in the spirit of what David was doing, I just want to real quickly look at the worksheet again because a couple people had chatted me earlier today asking about it. So I just want to do a quick review here. And guys, if you go back to page 65 in the book, in your big book, where we got those 3 columns. So again, don't have to use this worksheet. This is the version that's on purpose of this book.com. It's sort of a derivation of how Joe and Charlie did it. But if you look at this worksheet, if you want to use it, you see how it mirrors what's on page 65. So the first column I'm resentful at in the book, it's the same thing right here on the worksheet, right? Those are the people, institutions, and principles. And then column 2, the cause, why I'm pissed off at those people. And then third column, just as it mirrors in the book, what is it? How am I affected? So instead of having to write them out in the book, you can just do little check marks. But then the key here, the key is what David was just talking about, where we wrapped up on page 67 last week. So that's the fourth column. That's what were the exact natures of my wrongs. And we've got some little check boxes there because Bill asks us, where we had been selfish, dishonest, self-seeking, and frightened. The check boxes aren't enough though, right? That's it's sort of like a little preview of where I actually write out the where, which is what goes into the next part, the mistakes and the faults. Okay. So again, I said it last week, to say it again. You can write it out the way that Bill has it here in the book. You can use a worksheet like this one, or our good friend Paige is a different version of it. I'm not sure what Howard espouses. His is probably slightly different too. Doesn't matter, guys, as long as we follow the instruction here under the chart, which is nothing counted but thoroughness and honesty. So if I'm thorough and I'm honest, and I'm also going to throw in, and none of those causes are longer than 20 words, you're doing it the right way. Okay? So again, if you have more questions about this, chat us on the side, or in the WhatsApp group, and we're happy to answer those. But now we're going to move into the fear inventory. You can take that down for the moment, please, Em. Thank you. Okay. So we're picking up the bottom paragraph on 67. And again, just referring to on 65, if you look at the example in the affects my column, you'll see some of the affects my, you'll see the word fear is bracketed a few places. Bill's going to start by referencing those entries there, okay? So here we go. Notice that the word fear is bracketed alongside the difficulties with Mr. Brown, Mrs. Jones, the employer, and the wife. This short word somehow touches about every aspect of our lives. It was an evil and corroding thread. The fabric of our existence was shot through with it. It set in motion trains of circumstances which brought us misfortune we felt we didn't deserve. But did not we, ourselves, set the ball rolling. Sometimes we think fear ought to be classed with stealing. It seems to cause more trouble. To get us started, David, we can ping pong this a little back and forth.
Okay, wonderful. So yeah, so again, David pointed out this is the second part of our four-step inventory, and notice the word fear is bracketed. So we go back to page 65. We see it is bracketed alongside in the third column in Bill's illustration on page 65, and it's right next to the words most of the time, right alongside the word self-esteem. And self-esteem is the way that I feel about myself, you know, and what I expect other people to do to build my self-esteem. Pride is different than that. Pride is the way that the world views me, or how I feel the world views me. So self-esteem is internal, pride is external. So this word here being bracketed along self-esteem, like, let me give you an example what that looks like is and we were talking about this with a member prior to the meeting, is I was fearful that she was going to leave me, you know, and this affects my self-esteem. If she could just assure me that she has faith that I will get sober and stay sober, which I give her no inclination that I could pull that off on my own power, and I'm not going to go to any of those meetings, and I'm not going to get a sponsor work any steps, it is affecting my self-esteem. You know, if she would just give me the love and the affection that I so desire, I'm looking for the outside world to affect my internal condition, and that can't happen. It doesn't work. That's the wrong motive of operation. It just is. It is about a relationship with power here. So as my self-esteem I build my self-esteem, and this is not to be confused with ego. This is not. It's like being confident that I'm a child of God is where my self-esteem lies today. So back to page 67, and it alongside the difficulties of with Mr. Brown and Mrs. Jones, the employer and his wife, the short words somehow touches about every aspect of our lives. David's probably going to give an example of fear, how it shows up in our life, so I'm not going to jump on that. But I'm going to go on the next powerful, powerful sentence that Bill says. It was an evil and corroding thread. The fabric of our existence was shot through with it. So definition that I gave Emily today, and it comes out of 1937 or 30, whatever, 38 dictionary I have. Shot means infused or permeated. So this fear is shot through the fabric of my existence. So if you get shot, if you actually take a bullet, the bullet permeates, it spreads throughout. That's what this fear is doing. It is spreads throughout me internally. It just shot through me. And Bill's using the example with the fabric that is doing that. So, but this is permeated. It's the quality of the element of that I can die from this also. So that is one description of fear. And then it sets in motion of trains of circumstances that brought us misfortune we felt we didn't deserve. But did we not ourselves set the ball rolling? I can't see the truth in that yet. I'm going to see it as I put it on paper. And as I get to the final column, I will see the truth, how fear has been driving me around and how fear can still drive me around. So so let me give you just one example, and I'll be quiet after this. And it's later in the steps more often. And I'm going to tie this into a 9th step. And I got this actually from Howard. So men of faith or men of courage. Okay. So think about what that looks like. So I have this fear that I have to make a 9th step amends. And I know I'm jumping ahead. I've never made a proper amends in my entire life. I made many apologies, and I've worn those things out over and over again. Right? People are just sick and tired of my apologies. They're meaningless. But an amends means to change. You know, that means, like, if I was going to change the Constitution of my country, I'm not going to apologize to the Constitution. I am making a change to it. So this is a change. So what I got to do is I got to pick up the phone and I got to make my appointment with the new person. But until I pick up the phone and until I do that, I'm full of fear because I don't know how this thing's going to turn out. And so once I pick up the phone, the guy goes, "Yeah, I'll accept the appointment. Meet me next Tuesday at 9 o'clock." Now I have some courage. Now my fear turns into courage because I picked up the phone. I've actually performed the action. Now when I go sit with someone and I start to make my proper amends, and I'll go into that when we get into the 9th step. I'm not going to go into today what a real amends for me looks like, but now I have complete faith that the next amends that I'm going to make is going to be based off of faith. that this was going to turn out okay for me. But the fear is driving me until I perform the action, which is courage, which designates me to a place of faith.
Do you have that 1939 dictionary on your desk there, David?
I have it behind him
You
on another table. What
we
up?
didn't put this on our list. Could you actually grab us a definition of fear out of there?
Sure, of course.
Yeah, I mean, I
Yeah,
think so. I think we all have an understanding of what fears are, and I think it's fair to say this is a word I've been intimate with my entire life, all the way back. And when you really think about these three inventories, you know, if you're experienced with taking the steps or if you're just going through them for the first time now, what I hope you're starting to get an appreciation for is what are we talking about here? What are we putting down on paper so that ultimately we can, you know, inventory, that we find these facts and face them, and then what? Be rid of them. What are these things? Resentment. We spent the whole session last week because if you're anything like me, you had a big old pile of giant, unrelenting mountain of anger and misgivings and hostilities and grudges that we collectively call those things resentments. Now we're starting to talk about fear. And what are these fears? Right? And so I've heard many different speakers that I respect talk about this many different ways. Well, put these fears, don't put those kind of fears. Listen, put all your fears. Are the most important fears on here that if you're afraid of bugs and spiders and snakes and rats, I don't know that those are the most important fears that if I'm taking the steps I'm worried about, but if they're fears, put them down. But let's talk about the real fears that plague us as we're going through life having our human experience. If you were with us when we talked about step 1 4 weeks ago, you heard when we covered those bedevilments on 52, what's one of those bedevilments? We were full of fear. And I'm going to repeat the examples that I gave them because I do every time I talk about fear because I think they're very practical and most of us can relate to them. And again, we're doing a fear inventory because we are full of fear. It's not because we're a little timid or occasionally scared or sometimes uneasy or anxious. We are full of fear when it comes to the human living experience. All right. So the girlfriend says to me, "Oh, David, we've been together for a couple of years now. Don't you think you ought to buy me an engagement ring and we get married?" And then, guys, what's the first thought? Oh no, this woman's trying to trap me. What is that? That's a fear of commitment. It's an irrational fear of commitment. I'm not going to be able to be a free man and go and live and conquer, right? It's ridiculous, but it's fear. And then what's the next fear, though? 2 seconds later, oh, wait a minute. If I don't marry this good woman who puts up with all my crazy drinking and behavior, I'm never going to find the right partner and I'm going to be alone the rest of my life. I go from the fear of commitment to the fear of being alone in a split second. And in my unrecovered state, I see everybody nodding and smiling because we all, and I'm only talking about my experience as a straight man. So I don't know if well, I see some women who's going to say straight or gay or men, whatever. Everybody's nodding, whatever our orientations and genders are. This seems to be universal as alcoholics and addicts. And I shouldn't be surprised by that. We are afraid. We're afraid of commitment. We're afraid of being alone, right? I'm just sharing my experience here. And then here's the other one I use all the time at work. They say, "Hey, David, you've been doing a good job lately. We're going to give you a promotion. We're going to make you a manager." What's my first fear? Immediately, oh God, more responsibility. Now I'm going to have to show up to work every time. I better stop stealing money out of the till. I better punch in and out of the time clock just like everybody else. I better set an example. I don't know if I can have fear of responsibility. And then what's my next thought a second later? Not thought, excuse me, feeling. A moment later, it's like, oh God, but if I don't take this promotion, I'm never going to make any money. I'm never going to have a career, make a living, and I sure as hell won't be able to buy that ring so I can marry my girlfriend. Fear, guys, fear, 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 fear. When my head, my heart, and my gut are all sick and twisted and corrupted, I only think in fear outcomes. These are the things that we really want to focus on in the list. Again, put all those fears. It's okay. But think about these real fears. How about the fear? I'm afraid I'm going to drink again. I'm afraid I'm going to drug again. I'm afraid I'm going to lose my kids. I'm afraid I'm going to lose my husband and my wife, my partner, my boyfriend, girlfriend. I'm afraid I'm going to lose my job, right? I'm afraid I'm going to die. I'm afraid I'm going to get cancer. I'm afraid I'm going to, afraid, all those things. I'm afraid to walk outside the house sometimes, right? Some of us are agoraphobic in our sickness. Don't even want to leave the home. All of these fears become so claustrophobic, right? Which is another fear in and of itself sometimes, right? These are the things that constrict me, that hold me in, hold me at bay, right? These are the fears that we really want to list. Did you find that, David? You got a definition?
Yeah, I did. It was a great call that you did that too, by the way. It was I love it. So a very big description too, by the
Yeah,
way.
go ahead. Take your time.
Yeah, this is a great call, David. So fear, a feeling of dread, alarm, fright, anxious, concern, worry, awe, profound reverence, especially for God. Then synonyms of fear. Check this out:
Mm.
dread, fright, alarm, dismay, consternation, panic, terror, fright, dismay, panic, terror, horror. I mean, you want me to keep going? I mean, it's like
Right.
the definition here is crazy, but I can't leave you with just that. I have to give you something positive to hang your hat on here because that's what's been driving me. That's what's been blocking me. That's what I need to be free of. And we're going to find out that I don't have the power to do that, but this inventory is going to get me on the path to get rid of it. But what's the opposite of that? Fearless. And there's two references of fearless in the big book, and there's like 9 in the 12 and 12, but I'm gonna, or something like that. So on page let me see if I can find it here real quick. Oh, we beg you to be fearless and thorough from the very start. We're gonna beg you as members of Alcoholics Anonymous, Cocaine Anonymous, whoever's studying the big, we're begging you. Why? Because we know the outcome of this. If you could just be fearless from the very start, just be that way from the very start, fearless. And fearless, definition of fearless is this: free from fear. Go figure. Free from, wouldn't that be great? Like, have no fear. I've been a salesman for 40 years, and if I look back at if I give you a testimony of what it was like to make a cold call, and for those of you who have done that, it was frightening. I don't necessarily have to cold call any longer, but I do have to meet new people all the time. I am fearless. I take God wherever I go. And a couple of my sponsees around here, and this is an example that I always use, and it's my example, and I share it with them, and I express to them so solely how important this is. Open up the door and let God walk in first. Let him walk in first. And that experience, every time I've been called on the rug, and in my 40 years of experience of being a salesperson, and called into big boardrooms with a giant whiteboard, and a meeting of people with suits and ties. And I'm in a polo shirt and a pair of jeans because I dress like my customers dress, the ones that work on the floor. And when I walk in there, I feel a little bit out of place if I put myself in that position in my head. But the bottom line is I'm actually doing my job. And they've said things to me like, hey, by the way, the numbers that you've been writing for us in this company have changed drastically over the last 6 months. You used to write this kind of business, and now you're writing this much. Can you please explain to me why that is? And then I have yeah, because now I'm taking care of this, that, and the other thing. Okay, thank you. Oh my God. I don't know what your experience was. My experience before I got sober, before I became fearless, before I lived my life honestly, was what lie am I going to tell in the moment to get me out of this mess that I put myself in, right? And I thought I was pretty good at it. I don't live like that anymore. So I can be fearless today because I am, as the book says, I beg you to be fearless and thorough from the very start. Today, I try to be as honest as I possibly can. If you want to be in sales, integrity is everything. Integrity is everything. Don't overpromise. Overdo the work. What's the word I'm looking for? Just give them as much as you possibly can, but don't overpromise. That is never a good thing. Anyways.
All right. Let's read the next paragraph, and then we're going to look at the worksheet here. So what are we doing with all these fears? How are we going to get from fears to fearlessness? Well, we got to inventory them, right? So the second paragraph first paragraph on 68. We reviewed our fears thoroughly, means all of them, right? We put them on paper. We talked last week the critical importance and power of writing, right? So we put them on paper, even though we had no resentment in connection with them. Or maybe we do. Look back on 65. Sometimes you do. Okay, so either way, you put them all on paper is the key. We asked ourselves why we had them. Wasn't it because self-reliance failed us? Self-reliance was good as far as it went. but it didn't go far enough. Some of us once had great self-confidence, but it didn't fully solve the fear problem or any other. When it made us cocky, it was worse. So, Em, throw that fear worksheet up there, please. And again, all these inventories, nothing's going to count except thoroughness and honesty. Now, the way that David and I did our version of this sheet here, and again, we're not saying we're right, anybody else is wrong, because a lot of other people we respect have a different uh, layout. We do the fear inventory as two columns only. And the reason why is if you look at what Bill says here, is it says, we reviewed our fears thoroughly, we put them down on paper. So the first column, I am fearful of, and then asked ourselves why we had them. Column 2, why do I have this fear? How did self-reliance fail me? Now listen, again, if there's a way to do it in 3 or 4 columns, you study with Paige. I think she does something like that. Paige is brilliant in her work of the steps. God bless. I personally am a fan of keeping it simple. What is the fear? And I know why I have it. This is what I love about what Bill's saying here. There's no wandering in the desert experience prescribed here. He's literally asking me the question and then giving me the answer. Why do I have the fear? Well, wasn't it because self-reliance failed us? As I've been trying to power through life, being driven by my old ways of thinking and feeling and reacting, all the things that are haunting my head, my heart, and my gut, I'm trying to run the show. And it's just not coming off well. I'm messing stuff up. And because I can't exercise control that I want, I get terrified of everything. Go ahead, David, about maybe 3 minutes, and let's move on to the next inventory.
Okay, so we reviewed our fears, we put them on paper. So the cause here is fear, and the condition is self-will or self-reliance. That's what puts me in this position to be harmed. So we asked ourselves why we had them. Wasn't it self-reliance failed us? What is the definition of self-reliance? Self-reliance is one's own power. One's own power. How am I doing on my own power? Again, when we look at the bedevilments on page 52, I ask that question when we go to treatment centers or jails, or we do these talks. We say to ourselves, on my own power, how am I doing with personal relationships? How am I own power? How am I doing at work? How am I doing with happiness? How am I doing with all these things in my life? How am I doing on my own power? What if I incorporated a power greater than myself so that I could be confident that will go with ease closer than my breath? And we know deep down inside of every man, woman, and child is the fundamental idea of God. If I could just uncover that, then I wouldn't have to live in this fear and the driving me around. And then, so self-reliance is good as far as it went, but it didn't go far enough. Some of us had great self-confidence. I know people who are completely confident in themselves, but it didn't fully solve the fear problem, right? I have to remember that. Why is this fear? This fear for me is unless usually I feel fear because I'm threatened by something. Fear of losing something I have, fear of not getting something I want, or fear that I'm going to be found out that I'm not the person that I
Say
say
that
I
again,
am.
David. Repeat those 3 things one more time. I want everyone to hear that.
Fear, fear of losing something that I already have, fear of not getting something that I want, or fear of or being found out that I'm not the person that I portray every day in my life.
So same as we recommended on the resentment inventory, 1 column at a time. Write down all your fears. Fear, 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 fear. Right? I'm afraid of commitment. I'm afraid of being alone. I'm afraid of success. I'm afraid of failure. I'm afraid of death. Afraid. Get them all down, and then go back through and write how self-reliance failed me, and how that's causing, creating, reinforcing, exacerbating that fear. Okay, one at a time. Are you going to show us again? Thank you.
Mhm.
Okay. Column 1 all the way down. Column 2 all the way down. Okay. You guys know these fears. Thank you, Em. You guys know these fears just as well as you know your resentments. I sure did. Right. And we were talking before the meeting, and Haley was saying, oh, I was feeling like sort of indulgent writing these resentments. And guys, if you're not feeling that way, you're probably not doing it the right way. You're probably not being thorough and honest. Put down all the stuff that as you're writing it, you feel stupid, you feel a little humiliated, you feel a little embarrassed. That's how you know you're being thorough and honest. And this is the best part. A huge part of this inventory process is that I see who I was and who I don't ever have to be again. You will be amazed by virtue of doing your first formal 4-step and then continuing the step work and continuing our way of life. The vast majority of these things, 98% is going to be gone forever. And I say 98% because the other 2% is the stuff that it takes a while to keep working on. And that's why we've got other steps like 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 that help me continue to batter away at those things with my higher power. So that's the fear inventory. Pretty simple. Now we're on to our third one. So the third inventory is our sex conduct or sex harms inventory. And it's a little bit different than the first two. Now you can see it's a lot similar and common. It has to do with behaviors and things. But in that resentment inventory was a focus on how I felt harmed. But I in addition, saw my mistakes and faults. Then in our fear inventory, here's what I'm afraid of. And here's why, here's how, here was the illustration of self-reliance failing me. This sex inventory is really about my conduct and harms. So eventually, and not that much further down the road, we're going to get to the 8th step, which is going to be largely based on our 4th step. And a lot of the content from the sex conduct to sex harms is going to be a straight copy and paste into 8. Sometimes there's a little bit of work to translate the resentments and fears into harms where there is one. The sex conduct one tends to be is pretty much a 1-for-1 as you'll see as we get into it. And before we start reading from the book, think about this. Please, let's be clear, especially to newer people who've never done this. No one here is interested in the story of your physical sex life, right? This is a inventory that you ought to be able to read to my grandmother. Okay. I'm not interested in your penthouse forum exploits. That's not what we're talking about here with sex. Although there are some references to sexuality and sex acts for sure. What this is about, this is not about physical sex, right? I mean, it might be a component of it. This is about my sexual, romantic, intimate relationships, right? Yeah. Howard's pointing at his dome. It's right. It's the stuff that's all sideways in my head, my heart, and my gut. And I'm going to tell you also, here's a big part of this. Remember in resentments, the wrongdoing of others, fancied or real, means make believe or real. There's going to be stuff in your sex inventory, if you're anything like 9, that had nothing to do with other people, right? Especially in today's age of technology and bots and apps and all these things, right? This is the entirety of my sexual, romantic, intimate relationships, right? So let's pick this up on the bottom of 68. Now about sex. Many of us, understatement, sorry, many of us needed an overhauling there. But above all, we tried to be sensible on this question. It's so easy to get way off the track. Here we find human opinions running to extremes, absurd extremes perhaps. One set of voices cry that sex is a lust of our lower nature, a base necessity of procreation. Then we have the voices who cry for sex and more sex, who bewail the institution of marriage, who think that most of the troubles of the race are traceable to sex causes. They think we do not have enough of it, or that it isn't the right kind. They see its significance everywhere. One school would allow man no flavor for his fare, and the other would have us all on a straight pepper diet. We want to stay out of this controversy. We do not want to be the arbiter of anyone's sex conduct. We all have sex problems. We'd hardly be human if we didn't. What can we do about them? All right, so I just want to make sure everybody understands what Bill's saying here. I want to translate this into a little bit more sort of common language, and then I'm going to let David come in and comment. So just let me break this down first. So about sex, most of us needed an overhauling there. How about all of us needed an overhaul? What's an overhaul? It's a large radical change, right? But we have to be sensible. That means we have to use good judgment, discernment about it. It's easy to get way off the tracks because this is a taboo topic, right? And then this idea of human opinions running to extremes. So when they say one set of voices say sex is a lust of our lower nature, a base necessity of procreation, these are the people and no judgment on any part of the spectrum here. These are the people who say, hey, listen, maybe according to my religion or my belief system, we only have sex to try to create children, and that's it, right? And if we're real horny or whatever, that's us being like, this is the lower state of like animals, like it's wrong, and that's okay. People are entitled to their opinion. And then at the other end of the spectrum, it's just like the straight pepper diet, described as later, wild sexual liberation, no marriage, polyamory, whatever, crazy, X and numbers of people and whatever wild stuff. Okay. And again, no judgment. It's whatever. The no judgment is so key because it's saying we don't want to be the arbiter. That's like the judge of anybody's sex life. That is not for us to judge or decide. Later, we're going to learn this is between, like everything else, as I get healthier, this is between me and my higher power, between me and God. I don't have the right to judge my own behavior outside of how I do it with God, right? Work on it with Him. And I sure as hell don't have the right to judge you. What makes me right? What makes me wrong? What makes me have an opinion? Well, I have an opinion on everything, especially the things I'm uneducated about, right? That's one of my defining characteristics. But you guys don't need to hear any of that stuff, right? This is not about recognizing the differences. It's just they exist, and this is none of our business.
Yeah, I don't know if you guys ever heard the tiny little joke in Alcoholics Anonymous where the sponsor really didn't understand the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous very much. And they said, hey, we're going to go over this sex conduct thing. So go to page 96 of the book. And if not, on 96 of the book, when the prospect goes there, let me just read it to you real quickly. Do not be discouraged if your prospect does not respond at once. Search out another alcoholic and try again. You are sure to find someone desperate enough to accept with eagerness what you offer. We find it a waste of time to keep chasing a man who cannot or will not work with you. I'm not going to go on to the whole thing, but that is funny that you would read it like that because it seems like we should be like chasing people down and have sex with them. That's not what we're, no. This overhauling that David just talked about here, that is back on the proper page on page 68. The overhauling is of the mind is Howard was referencing. It's my mind needs to change on this thing, and the sex conduct is what we call it. It's not a sex history. It's not about. So I've sat down with these men and they want to give me a dialogue of all the people they've conquered and their egos are about this. I'm like, stop. I'm going to call my grandmother, and you can explain all these things to my grandmother to see how that makes you feel if you want all this intercourse that you had. It's just like, that's not what this is about. It's not about, this is about personal relationships. This is about how I treat other people today. And I'll give you one brief example of what that looked like for me. I'm very fortunate. My kids were very young when I got sober, and now they're all grown up and have their own families and stuff. I'm very blessed to be a part of that today by the grace of God and the fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous. But when I wanted to have sex with my wife and I didn't get to have sex with my wife, I would pout. And what I found out about is when my wife was comfortable is when we would make love. And I know this, I'm keeping this G-rated, honest. I'm trying to here. G-rated. And because this is about personal relationship. What makes her feel comfortable? When the kids are right down the hall from where we live, that made her uncomfortable. This is not about my needs. It's not about my needs. I had to put someone's common welfare before my own. And that was my wife in this situation. So when she became comfortable, then that act would come into play. It's about how I treat other people and how they feel about these things. Or in the other case, holding back sex and stuff like that in a marriage. There may be medical reasons why you would do that and stuff, but in the case that I'm bringing up here, I have to put someone's common welfare before my own. But when I'm working with another person, I'm not the arbiter of their sex life. I'm not going to tell them who they need to date. I will tell you this, and I got this from Charlie Parker. When you haven't had a relationship in a while and you get in one and you say, hey, I'm going to start dating this girl, you just made my job as a sponsor a whole lot harder. It's really what you just did. You really did. Because now you're going to have, there's two problems in life. They're money and sex. That's really about it. And when I find out that you're having money problems and it's probably attributed to the relationship that you're having, or you're having a relationship problem, it's probably attributed to the money problem, that makes my life as a sponsor a whole lot harder. But my pat answer for that is, where is God in all this? This is self-will, self-reliance, self-will run riot. This is about change. Again, the overhauling of the mental condition that I suffer from here, about how I need to treat other people today. So that's what I got on that.
So I'll just a couple words and then we'll talk about how we write the inventory here. So again, we bring this stuff into recovery. We bring all those resentments, those angers, right? Those hostilities, those grudges. We bring in these fears, and then we bring in all of our baggage around, sex and intimacy and romance. These things, these strong interpersonal relationships, right? And so it should be very front of mind, and it all goes down on paper, right? Got to be thorough, got to be honest. And I we'll talk about the sharing of when we get to step 5. Sorry, I was going to get ahead of myself. Okay, so now let's talk about putting this on paper. So we continue on 69. Thank you, Emily. We reviewed our own conduct. Let me start again. We reviewed our own conduct over the years past. Where had we been selfish, dishonest, or inconsiderate? Whom had we hurt? Did we unjustifiably arouse jealousy, suspicion, or bitterness? Where were we at fault? What should we have done instead? We got this all down on paper and looked at it. And there's some words in there. Hopefully, you guys picked up as I was trying to emphasize them. I just want to read this again, guys. It's so important. We reviewed our conduct. This is my conduct on here, not the other person, right? Where had I been selfish, dishonest, inconsiderate? Who did I hurt? Okay. Where did I unjustifiably arouse jealousy, suspicion, or bitterness? Where was I at fault? What should I have done instead? And I must put this down on paper and look at it. So, in the same way that Bill's got it written here in this little short, powerful paragraph, we've got another worksheet here that follows it, right? So now the first question is, where had we been selfish, dishonest, and inconsiderate? So we got checkbox again. Now there's not really room to write any wheres, so you got to jam that where in with the whom did I hurt. Okay. Now let's just pause for a second here. Let's say, excuse me, I was in a relationship and I was totally inappropriate in that relationship, and the relationship came to a really ugly crashing end, with the woman that I was involved with. I was a drunk, I was a drug addict, I stole money out of her purse, I ran around on her, all these terrible things I did, let's say. Who did I hurt? Well, I hurt her. Anybody else? What if she had kids, right? Let's say I didn't do anything directly to the kids, but I was like a father to them. I was involved in her life for a couple of years. I was like a stepdad. And then I ruined this relationship, right? I can hurt people through flack, through collateral damage, just as much as I could hurt the person that I was directly involved with, right? How about the next part? Did I unjustifiably arouse jealousy, suspicion, or bitterness? So did my behavior drive that other person crazy? Right? Again, these days with all this stuff with your phone, so to keep my phone locked down, and did she not know my password? You know what's great today? My wife knows the password to my phone. God bless, go in and see all the nonsense that me and my buddies talk about, making fun of each other as, sports fans, stuff like that. God bless. She just could not be less interested in looking at my phone, but she's welcome to, right? I got nothing to hide. But what were we doing before with the texting and the websites and the sex hookup apps and all those kinds of things, right? Inspiring the other people to be jealous and suspicious of our behavior, rooting through our stuff, and bitter by our behavior, right? Demanding sex, withholding sex, cold shouldering, right? Emotional manipulation, all of these things, passive aggressiveness behavior around intimacy. Where was I at fault, right? What did I do wrong? Bottom line, I was a jerk. I cheated on her. I stole from her. I yelled at her kids. I didn't show up at her, or I showed up at her parents' house drunk. Like there's a million things that I did, I'm sure. Keep them 20 words each, though, just like in the resentment inventory. Don't write a novel here, right? And what should I have done instead? That's like the fourth column of the resentment, right? I understand through the first few columns here how I was wrong, what I screwed up, who I hurt. How should I have behaved ahead instead? Well, maybe I should have been a good boyfriend. Maybe I shouldn't have been an alcoholic. Maybe I should have this. Maybe I should have that. Da 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 da. Right? I don't want to characterize the appropriate level of what should I have done because I think that gets sorted out as you write the inventory and with some prayer and consideration with your higher power. But how ought I have acted differently? Why don't you take a spin, David?
Yeah, and this paragraph lays out these 5 columns for me perfectly. They're short, a short paragraph for a change from Bill. First column is where we've been selfish, dishonest, and inconsiderate. So, what I just pointed out earlier in my relationship with my wife, especially early in sobriety, was I selfish? Yeah, because I wanted to have sex and not make love whenever I wanted to. And what I didn't realize is how uncomfortable that made her because the kids were right down the hall. So that was very selfish and it was inconsiderate. So today, that is not, well, they don't live here anymore, but still, I'm still considerate of my wife, you know. Uh, but whom did I hurt? I hurt my wife, and I hurt further relationships in her life. The third column here is jealousy, suspicion, and bitterness. So I have a lot of times I found myself, I didn't even realize this. This is like I cannot differentiate the true from the false. So maybe I'm talking to someone, a woman at a meeting or something, and maybe I'm flirtatious. Maybe, so the rule of thumb today is this. It's real simple, and I have business dealings with tons of corporations, and a lot of them are women in high up positions, and I have to sit in meetings with them. And my sister, I have 2 sisters. One of them says, "You're way too charming, dude," and that means I'm way too flirtatious. And I found out through trial and error that I was arousing jealousy in my relationship with my wife. I was causing suspicion. I was allowing bitterness to be part of it. And I didn't realize the stuff that I was doing to her. So the rule of thumb that I use today is real simple. It's a professional manner. And I pretend if my wife was standing behind me in a conversation with another woman, would I be that charming? Would I do those things with another woman? No, I wouldn't. Of course I would, because I'd be aware that she's standing behind me. So I need to take that God into that relationship with those other human beings and not arouse jealousy in my wife. Like having an honest relationship with another human being is the most important thing in my life today, in sobriety today. Then I find out where my fault was in that fourth column there. My fault was that I was building my ego was building my self-esteem. I was allowing my ego to run the whole show. What should I do different? I should treat people the way I want to be treated. I should treat people the way I should treat my wife. I don't want to arouse jealousy. I want her to be confident in our relationship. We were building a lot, we've been married 35 years. I want to continue that process for another 35 years, God willing, right? And I don't want her to have to struggle with any of that. That's so selfish. That's so dishonest. That's so inconsiderate of me that I need to fill my needs. No, that's not about that. Again, I'm going to go back to the thing that I said. I got to put someone else's common welfare before my own, and that goes for when I'm working with. I work with other people, and they say, "Well, I just want to have sex with this woman." I was like, "Dude, that's very selfish. That's very inconsiderate, and it's very dishonest. What should you do different?" Well, you probably should have a conversation with her and see if there's something that she wants to do. It's like you can't I can't force my will on other people today. It's just not the right way to do business. It's not the way to treat other people.
Hmm. So I alluded to this a little bit before. The entries that go in the sex conduct, the sex harms inventory. Let's just think about some of the sort of usual suspects that would be on there. So current husbands, wives, partners, boyfriends, girlfriends, exes, right? The people in their lives that got hurt through the damage that I did in that relationship, right? But what about some of these other things too, right? Maybe people I wasn't in a formal relationship with, people that I had just sort of sexual encounters with, right? Now again, something in the spirit of being thorough and being honest, as I write my inventory, I have to use some judgment, some decision making, some discernment about what goes on there and what doesn't. Just because I had let's say, a sexual encounter with someone doesn't mean I did anything wrong, right? So most of were adults, grown men and women. We were two consenting adults. We decided to get together and have sex, once or a few times or something, and it was okay, and it was all above board, and it was okay for everybody, and then we moved on. If that was truly okay, then I don't think it goes on my sex conduct inventory. But that's where we have to be introspective. That's we need to have some honesty and need to have some prayer. Was it all above board? Was it all on the level? Or did I tell the woman what she wanted to hear so that I could achieve sex? You know what I mean? This is the difference. And then just like we see as we list all those resentments, and as you'll start to see listing all those fears, and then really I think it coalesces into the fifth step, patterns start to emerge. What were the patterns of my behavior? How was I aggressive in these situations? How was I passive aggressive? How was I manipulative to get my ends? Right? These are all the things that have to be considered to make sure they go on the list. And again, I also want to stress, guys, this isn't necessarily all the real relationships and interactions that I had in my life. All the stuff that I made up in my head, right? Things that only happened over a phone, things that only happened in a chat room, things that only happened on sites, challenges with pornography, any of these things where maybe it didn't even have real human interaction, right? These are all the things that go on paper. Now, if you start to notice trends and patterns and things that feel like addiction issues, sexual addiction issues, I don't have this experience, so I can't talk about it. But I can tell you that there are some great fellowships out of there. I know some people that are in these things. And so you might have come into Alcoholics Anonymous and found out, oh, you've got another addiction problem elsewhere in your life. Fantastic. You can go to one of these other 12-step fellowships. You can do some work there. And guess what? 12 steps you're going to be working? The same 12 steps. Guess what you're going to write over there? I'm sure there's a sex inventory as well, right? All of it's got to go on here, guys. Thorough, honest. Okay. David, anything to circle back on here? Yeah.
Are we? We're not going to touch the next two paragraphs, or we are?
We can do a little bit. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I think we should just touch on them real quick, because I mean, that's really God's mold our ideas, right? This is something that we need to take to God. So if you don't mind.
Yep. Yeah. So we skipped the sort of after part of the fear inventory that talks about how we start to move on beyond fear. And that's really what it's prompting for here is after we get our inventory, how do we start to think about these sexual, romantic, intimate relationships differently? So I'll read both of them, David, and we can just talk about them both.
Okay.
Come home.
Okay.
Stretch here. Okay. So 69, paragraph 2. In this way, we try to shape, so this is moving forward now from the inventory. In this way, we try to shape a sane and sound ideal for our future sex life. We subjected each relation to this test. Was it selfish or not? We asked God to mold our ideals and help us to live up to them. We remembered always that our sex powers were God-given and therefore good, neither to be used lightly or selfishly, nor to be despised and loathed. Whatever our ideal turns out to be, remember, no right or wrong here. This is between me and my creator. So whatever our ideal turns out to be, we must be willing to grow toward it. We must be willing to make amends where we've done harm. That's coming in 8, provided that we do not bring about still more harm in doing so, right? In 9. In other words, we treat sex as we would any other problem. In meditation, we ask God, also known as pray, what we should do about each specific matter. The right answer will come if we want it.
Yeah. So the reason why I asked David to do that, because and even on page 70, it's gonna give us the relationship with God that's gonna mold this ideas in our mind. So It says that in this way we try to shape a sound and a sane, so right thinking and sound idea. So the idea is to mold my thinking for future sex life, so that I know how to treat other human beings. And then the prayer is we ask God to mold our ideas and help us live up to them. Without that power in my life, so if sex is a problem in my past, it is inevitably going to be a problem in my future, and which blocks me up from the sunlight and the spirit. So, and then it says, we remembered always that our sex powers are God given. I got to remember that. It's giving me, that's a warning that I got to remember this is God given and therefore good, neither to be lightly or selfishly, nor to be despised or hated or loathed or rejected. Like, I got to remember that. And then it says, whatever our idea turns out to be, we must be willing to go toward it. A must in the big book. We must be willing to make amends. As David pointed out in step 8 and 9, where we have been done harm, provided that we do not bring about still more harm in doing so. In other words, I can't harm people by just getting out what I want to get out of my mouth. In other words, we treat sex as we would any other problem. In meditation, we ask God what we should do about each specific matter. The right answer will come if we want it. Next paragraph, I know we didn't get into it, but God is my arbiter now. He's my judge. And it talks about going into counsel with other people today through their examples in their life. And the next page gives us prayers to sum up. And earnestly pray for the right idea and the guidance in each questionable situation for sanity. So there's plenty of information here. There's direction for the problem, the solution, and the practical program of action, which in this case, it's always going to be relationship with power.
So let's do this as we're going to wrap up for here. Emily, let's just look at the 3 inventory worksheets one more time. And David, you and I just chime in here. Let's just do one more recap. Let's start with the resentment one again, please. So we covered it last week and we recapped a little bit at the beginning. This is my grudge list. This is my anger list. This is my hostility, my agitation, my irritability list. One column at a time. Again, column 1, the people, the institutions, and the principles that I'm angry with, how they made me feel, how they affected me, what's the cause, right? Sorry, the cause, then how it affects me. It hurts my self-esteem, how I feel about me, my pocketbook. That means my finances, my ambitions, how I want to grow, my security, my safety, my personal relationships, how I my interact with other people, my sex relations, which goes right into that sex conduct, my pride, how I think you guys look at me, and then my fears, which is going to lead us to the fear inventory. And then that critical 4th column, after I've gone one column at a time, where was I? Selfish, trying to keep stuff to myself, dishonest, lying, or omitting the truth, self-seeking, trying to take so I can have more, and then frightened, full of fear. And then specifically, where were my mistakes and faults? Anything to add on resentments, David?
Yeah, and all the warnings that come along with the resentment that we talked about here, they start on page 64, and it being number 1 offender, that this is the spiritual disease, and that the malady, when that is overcome, that we strain out mentally and physically, steps 4 through 7, that we listed all these people, and that we have to be honest and thorough about this whole process here. I can't alleviate and take anything off the page here at all. And again, I'm going to reemphasize that we need to be thorough and honest on that.
And then our fear inventory, again, simple 2-column inventory. Bill serves this one so easily for us back on 68. We reviewed our fears thoroughly at the top of 68. We put them on paper, column 1. And then a couple clauses later, we asked ourselves why we had them. Column 2, why do I have this fear? And he tells us, wasn't it because self-reliance failed us? So right in here, why do I have this fear? How did self-reliance fail me? Accelerating, exacerbating, being the catalyst to this fear.
That fear is an evil and corroding thread, it talks about there, that is shot through our existence. And then, as David pointed out, that what is the problem here? The problem is that self-reliance failed us too. And the fear problem, then it says, but it didn't fully solve the fear problem or anything else when it made us cocky or worse. So self-reliance, I got to have the opposite of self-reliance is God-reliance. I don't have the power to pull this fear out of me at all. And it talks about, as we go through this work here, how we outgrow fear.
And then the third one, the sex conduct, the sex harms. Again, sexual, romantic, intimate relationships, just like the resentments, fancied, so make believe or real. What are all the ways? What were all the situations in which I'd been selfish, dishonest, inconsiderate? Who did I hurt? Again, not just the people that I was directly involved with. Who got the collateral damage, right? The family, the friends, other people that got hurt by this. What behaviors and what ways did I unjustifiably arouse jealousy, suspicion, and bitterness? Specifically, where was I at fault? How was I wrong? And then in the final column, how should I have behaved? And I don't say should to be moral, right? But if I cause harm, there's a better way in which I could have behaved. That's the question.
And on page 69 in that second paragraph, it says, in this way, we tried to shape a sane and sound ideal of our future sex life. Here we go. We subjected each relationship to this test. Was it selfish or not? We asked God to mold our ideas to help us live up to them. Again, I don't have any power, choice, or control when it comes to that. Again, if the problem was in the past has been sex, inevitably it will be in the future if I don't get to God with this stuff.
Thanks, everybody. I'm going to kill the recording. We'll say a little prayer. And then if anybody's got any questions, we'll stick around for a few minutes. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, guys.